Sadly, no talk of how Arsenal are ruining football this week. But can I interest you in how Arsenal are ruining England? This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. Block me on Twitter, Gunner. It's international break. So, Arsenal no longer ruining football, at least for the time being. But Ben White getting an England call-up and, Bukayo Saka's form and, is Declan Rice really the player he's made out to be? What we need to shift our attention to is not whether Arsenal are ruining club football, but whether they're actually ruining the English national team and England football. We could cover that, but we won't. What we're going to do today, I think, is start to shift focus ahead, but not just ahead to the games that are coming up. We'll talk about that briefly, but all the way to the summer. It is international break after all, and I think it's a chance to say, okay, we are going to win the treble this season, and that is exciting. How do we steel man this dynasty? How do we become the dynasty that we know we not only deserve, but are promised? And that will be, I think, a fun diversion from what is a pretty slow news week and from having to relive the cup final. So we'll think about that. We did a countdown episode yesterday. Tim and Paul got together over on Patreon and answered 10 rapid fire questions about summer transfer targets and lineups for future games and how Max Dowman slots in and all things like that. So you can check that out. On Friday, we're going to have a power rankings with Clive. That's tomorrow, by the way. If you're listening to this on Thursday, then it's definitely tomorrow. Power rankings with Clive. We'll talk about all our rivals. And that is a much more fun conversation in many ways because they're all crap. And then next week, we're doing the Director of Football series. We're kicking that off where we have a certain amount of net spend. Don't talk about spend, talk about net spend. And we're going to say, here's who we'd sell, here's who we'd buy, and here's how we'd build for the future. Today, we'll kick that conversation off in earnest. So join us over there. Saliba50 is the code, Saliba50. If you want it for, just a couple of quid, check it out, see what you think. There's something just about every day if we can drag ourselves to the microphones, which usually we can do, and we would love to have you there. Okay, there is an event in Washington, D.C., the weekend of April 25th. And I say the weekend of April 25th because it kind of depends if the FA Cup semifinal is moves our game to a Sunday or a different time. If we're not in the semifinal, which would be unfortunate, then it would be the Newcastle game. But we will be there. We'll be at Franklin Hall. There's a website, acrossamerica.arsenalvisionpodcast.com, acrossamerica.arsenalvisionpodcast.com. You can find out more. It's a nationwide event here, and we'll explain that. Then we'll have Union Chapel in May and more details about that coming up. And next week, the Arsenal Vision Podcast, Arsenal Foundation, Arscast fundraiser for the refugees in the Zatari camp is coming up. It is arguably as important a time for those young people as there has ever been for two reasons we'll be talking about, and we'd love your support. That fundraiser will go live April 1st, as it always does. We'll have some great interviews with players and club members and people who help run the program. We'll be asking you to give. We will, of course, be giving, and it is the single most powerful, important, and exciting thing we do all year. And, oh, by the way, a little bit of karma right now for the Arsenal community could go a long way. 3 minutes from me to start this podcast. That's a lot. I apologize, but here with me now is Tim. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
How you doing?
Yeah, okay. I'm doing all right. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Judging by your background, beautiful sunny weather in London, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. My house faces the sun, so it's very, very it's very easy. There are a number of reasons I have to draw these curtains, but happily at the moment, keeping the sun off the back of my head because this is where I work is one of them. It does slightly annoy my wife though when she's working from home as well because I have to shut all the sunlight out. Which would annoy.
Thankfully, you live somewhere where you're bathed in it constantly, so
well,
no issue there.
I think that would annoy most global citizens, but for a Brazilian, it's particularly troubling.
Well, I have a promo code for a therapy website that can help you should you need to work through those challenges. Listen, real quick before we get into Arsenal men's team stuff and transfer stuff, because hashtag clicks. Arsenal did beat Chelsea in a game that involved some sensational goals the other day. Russo's maybe the pick of the bunch, at least on the Arsenal side. 3-1 over Chelsea in the first leg of the Champions League tie. What do you make of that, and how should we think about the return leg in terms of the odds that we can hold on?
Yeah, so, I mean, first off, this is a really valuable part of my kind of recovery process, as it were. The fact that the finals on Sunday, at Monday I was at Colney doing all the preview stuff, match day -1, press conference and all of that. So like I get to unplug from one matrix and plug into the other one, and the season quite often does have like those nice little divergences. The women's international break tends to go on when things are really busy for the men and vice versa. So, during this international break, Arsenal women play the 2 legs of this Champions League quarterfinal against Chelsea, and they've got a North London derby in the middle. And that's well, I say it's all by design. Obviously, the Champions League draw isn't by design; it's a draw. But having the North London derby during the men's international break, that is very deliberate as well. So generally, the fixture list is designed to be that way. So I get to jump straight into that world. As for the tie against Chelsea, it scarily had Man City vibes to it in terms of the Carabao Cup final, in that this is a really good time to play Chelsea. They're going through some things at the moment. They're about to lose some big players. There's some reports of a bit of unrest in the camp. Their squad's probably going to look very different next year. Their Chelsea women are hugely Liverpool men coded, in that their big generational totem figure manager left in the summer of 2024. They got a new manager in, Sonia Bonpastor, and she won the domestic treble. But exactly like Liverpool, everything was telegraphed. It's like, yeah, you've kind of picked up Emma Hayes' team and you've done it pretty well, but the pain is coming, basically, in terms of like transition, and that's kind of what they're going through. So they had a really poor result leading up to this as well. They drew with London City Lionesses, so it's a good time. And Arsenal were coming off the back of 9 straight victories, so it's been a good time. But this is also very coloured by the fact I wrote our Arsenal Women newsletter about this today. Arsenal v Chelsea is one of the only, I would say at this stage, proper women's football rivalries that has not been picked up and transplanted from the men's game. It does have a genuine enmity all of its own. It's treated like a derby. The teams don't like each other. They're both very successful. Every game they play against each other means something. Every year they will play each other in a big cup game as well, at least once. This is actually the first time they've met in Europe. So it also has that other dynamic of, people say form goes out the window in derbies, and usually it doesn't. If you look at Liverpool v Everton, Liverpool usually win. If you look at Arsenal v Tottenham, Arsenal usually win. They do usually go to form, but Arsenal Chelsea genuinely quite often doesn't. However, the game on Tuesday, that so much happened. It was so it was really windy and wet as well.
Oh God, the weather looked horrific.
Yeah, and that really coloured it. And the fact that it's a derby, and there's this, for Arsenal fans, wonderful context. Again, if you follow men's football, which if you're listening to this podcast, you certainly do, this inverse universe where we have won the Champions League twice and they have not done it. And we're the current European champions and we get to lord it over them. And it's an obsession for them because they've not done it yet. And they probably should have, albeit like Barca and Lyon are just massive, massive European clubs. And that makes it kind of difficult. But to be able to knock them out, so it's another year that they don't do it, and to do that ourselves and take out one of the favourites, obviously a massive, massive kind of carrot. So it's a massive result. However, next weekend, it's like the next goal in the tie will really colour what that second leg looks like at Stamford Bridge. And Chelsea, the way they play, they fly out of the blocks, both halves. They start very strongly. They did in this game as well. They hit the post twice in the first 10 minutes. And so for Arsenal, it's really, as it always is, but especially with this 2-goal lead, ride that out. Mate, if they get the next goal in the tie, then it really does look like it's theirs. So it's very fascinatingly poised. And it's a great game in women's football. It really is. One of the other quarterfinals, Elliot, was Real Madrid-Barcelona. Rubbish. Not a rivalry at all. It was 6-2 to Barca. Real Madrid have beaten Barca once in their 6-year existence. It's not a rivalry. This is.
Yeah. And it was, like I said, it was a great game with some great goals in it. If you haven't seen them, definitely check it out. There's not a lot of news. So we'll get to sort of thematic talking points in a moment, but there is one bit of news, and to call it news makes it sound more important than it is. But essentially, the key match incident panel, or key match panel of incidents, or the keep making people irritated panel, whatever KMPI or KMIP.
The People's Front of
Judeans people, PGMOL front, came out and said, good news, VAR did not make an error in not reversing the decision to not give Kai Havertz a penalty against Everton. Bad news, the referee did make an error in not giving Kai Havertz a penalty. Now, people are saying this is a logical fallacy. One thing cannot be true if the other is true. I'm actually going to disagree and then turn it over to you. I completely understand what they're saying, and I think it highlights an absurdity about the system the way it's set up. Because the system is currently set up to so strongly preference the on-pitch decision that even when the on-pitch decision is wrong and can be ruled as wrong, VAR could stick with it and have acted correctly based on its remit. We have essentially neutered VAR to the point where what it is a rubber stamp, and it will even rubber stamp wrong decisions and be told, good job rubber stamping it. You used the right threshold, even though the decision was wrong. And
you
at
are
some point,
technically correct, which
is
the
best form.
Foretold in Futurama.
The best form of correct. And so it really just raises the question, do we want VAR to be there to try to get more calls right or not? Because if we don't, then I come over to your side, Tim, which is just scrap the damn thing. Now, I want to be clear. You can watch some old matches and see some bad calls and be like, how on earth did we live like that? And I get it. But this highlights the problem with the system as built for me, Tim, which is that you can have a wrong refereeing decision, but a correct application of the rules by VAR in terms of their threshold for intervention. And that, to me, is not VAR's fault. It is the fault of the, let's be clear, idiots who run PGMOL and administer the laws of the game in the Premier League.
Yeah, so I won't bore everyone too much with why I'm a VAR abolitionist. Get rid now. I know not everyone holds that position and understand that, but that's my position and been my position from the start. I think one of the things this exposes is that it's the whack-a-mole syndrome. One of the reasons I'm an abolitionist, why can't I say that? And one of the reasons I never wanted it is there is not a good way of doing it. Every way that you propose to do it has holes in it that become exposed. And at the moment, what they've kind of decided on, for someone like me, it is probably as good as it gets in that we have a high bar for interference because we keep making people angry by interfering. But obviously what that exposes, VAR teaches you a lot about the law of unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences now is that referees are more reluctant to give decisions because they think VAR will bail me out. And then VAR goes, we're staying with the on-field decision unless there's a massive mistake. And that is obviously a bit of a psychological tautology going on there. And quite often you are just getting non-calls at the moment, like this one. So, and you're right, this kind of key incidents panel?
Key match incidents panel or keep matching idiots permanently. I don't know. Who could say for sure?
Yeah. And obviously, like you're right, like it has, I don't know if it has logic, but it's understandable because that is the interpretation. You can say it probably should have been a penalty, but it's not a high enough bar for VAR to get involved. And I think you're quite right to say, well, that's nonsense. VAR should be about getting things right. But then you get the other law of unintended consequences, which is VAR then starts getting involved too much and the game stops all the time and people then get annoyed with the decision VAR's given and all of that stuff. I think there is no good way to do this, basically, which kind of why I've been against it from the start. I think what's really funny about this whole like key match incident panel kind of thing, who and what is this for? Who and what is it for to relitigate decisions from weeks ago that annoyed people? And I will say one thing that I think Howard Webb might have learned from last season that I've noticed this is I see a lot less of him. I see a lot less of him. I hear a lot less from him. And I think he kind of came into the job thinking, okay, Mike Riley was my predecessor. Everyone hated him because they never heard from him. And he overcorrected. And he was on TV with his silly little TV show with Michael Owen and, in the stands at Bournemouth Arsenal. And it's like, go away, mate. Like, no one wants to see you. And to be fair, I think he's got it. I do think he's got it.
Can I pull you up on one thing, though? I don't for a second believe that a megalomaniac, I should say egomaniac, well, maybe megalomaniac and egomaniac, like Howard Webb decided, I want to stop being on TV. I think he's a narcissist. I don't think he decided that. I am pretty sure someone running the Premier League or at the club said, enough of this nonsense. This guy is drawing too much attention to the referees and the refereeing incidents, and it is bad for the game. If you want to keep your position, you get the heck off our TV screens and stop showing up so much and stop making yourself the story. We don't want you and your refs to be the story. So I would guess that he was told that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like one of the other things, what are his other feedback loops? Like Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, by the sounds of it, can get an audience with him, and that's about it. So whoever gave him that feedback, he's acted on it, essentially. Yep. And even when, like at the beginning of every season, they always come up with, I think, a pretty well-meaning kind of new directive or something, which then always undergoes the same pattern. They massively over-egg it. Everyone gets really annoyed, and then they drop it altogether, like the delaying play or wrestling in the penalty area or whatever it is. And they just can't seem to pitch it correctly, and they veer wildly between over-officiousness and then just completely dropping it, which then annoys everyone, because then people like us spend the whole season going, Declan Rice was sent off for that. Leandro Trossard was sent off for that. This guy's not even getting a telling off for it anymore, and it creates an inequality in the season. And their kind of directive this year, if I'm not mistaken, was supposed to be about the goalkeeper holding onto the ball.
Yeah.
And which, again, I think is perfectly well-meaning. It's perfectly like, yes, address that. But actually, it does kind of feel like that's been quite light touch. Like, I haven't seen that over-officiated. So again, maybe they've learned something from that. However, this is a long route to get to the key match incidents panel. Who and what is this for? Who cares? That game was weeks ago. Anyone that was angry about it stopped being angry about it and moved on. And it's nonsense anyway. Like, we don't need, like, the decisions happened. Like, do that amongst yourselves as a refereeing fraternity. If you definitely do that. Go back and review things.
Part of your performance review of your referees. Look, Tim, there's only two outcomes. It comes out and it says, hey, we got it right. And everyone's furious because clearly you didn't get it right. Or you say, hey, we got it wrong. And who does that help? I mean, how does it help to have them say, hey, we got it wrong? Because then you say, well, if points were dropped, thanks, where are our points? So to your point,
content.
It's just content. It is just content.
And like PGMOL have been too obsessed with content under Howard Webb. And like I said, I've given them a bit of credit for rolling some of that back. This is another one that needs to go. And like Dale Johnson, he knows what he's doing by mentioning Arsenal every time he tweets it out and all of that. And
but that's just his job, right? He's an entertainment journalist whose job is to create content around refereeing.
I can ignore that. It's fine.
Yeah.
I genuinely, I don't care. I'm not going to send him abuse or anything like that. He knows what he's doing with it. But like, PGMOL should not be doing that. They should not be in the content business. And this key match incidents panel stuff, like, sorry, get rid of it. Like, or keep it internal, guys.
Yeah.
Do it as an email.
Look, it is always going to be the case that there'll be some tension. People whose primary experience of football is going to matches will never, ever love VAR. Anyone who's attended a football match, and I don't mean this as like, as match-going fans, anyone who's attended a football match that was delayed by a VAR decision where you weren't sure what was being decided and a goal you've scored is being held for a check, like, it is a bad experience. If you watch from TV, it's a chance to run to the restroom or get another beverage, right? If you're at your local, it's a chance to order another pint. So it's a different kind of experience. I will also say, as an American, all of our sports have been fully infiltrated by what we call instant replay. And so we're used to it, but they are sports that inherently have stoppages. The problem with football is two things. It doesn't naturally have stoppages, at least it's not supposed to. And two, there aren't a lot of goals. And they're the most important thing that happened and the most exciting thing that happens in a game. And where VAR has brought something in that maybe I didn't anticipate. I don't want goals that shouldn't be allowed to stand. And I don't want goals that should be allowed to stand and not stand. But the going back to something back, did this guy back here 17 minutes ago, step on this guy's foot, and then a squirrel ran on the pitch and the squirrel tripped the guy, and then 17 minutes later he scored, so we have to chalk it off. Like, it does feel like they go looking for reasons to chalk it off, right? Like these two players not involved in the play got into a tussle and one took the other down, so we're going to chalk off the goal. And that's where I think football is tricky. How do you decide what should be reviewed for the purposes of determining whether you're going to let something stand? One thing I have enjoyed about the Premier League this season from a refereeing standpoint, the refs have seemed to prioritize non-interventionism over interventionism.
Yeah.
And I've always said that a petty call that changes the game does more damage than a non-call.
Yep.
Right? I mean, Kai wasn't given that pen. We went on and won it anyway. But if they had given Everton a petty penalty that gave them a 1-0 lead, maybe we drop points. I would rather the threshold for an 85% goal be very, very high and occasionally you don't give one you should have, than the threshold be very, very low and you wind up with a situation like we got with Saliba against Brighton, where you have two guys contesting a header in the box and you decide to give someone a goal for it. So I like that they seem to be erring on the side of non-interventionism. And as long as they continue to do that, I will have more patience for the refs. When they're doing things like sending players off for touching the ball and giving penalties for contesting a header in the box, that distorts the competition. When they fail to give a penalty, I think we can all acknowledge sometimes you don't get a penalty. It's still your job to go on and win the game. But when you get sent down to 10 men or you get put behind by a goal, that's much harder to recover. So look, long way of saying VAR is clearly still broken. And for me, where it's broken is still one of the things it was always broken by, which is I just think the talent level in the group is too low. But then the other thing, which is that the remit for how it's supposed to perform is a cluttered mess. So we live in hope that someday it'll be corrected without actually believing that. Moving on. I do want to get to some transfer stuff because I think there's meat on the bone for discussing that right now. But I do want to take your temperature also just a little bit. Where are you at in terms of the sorrow, sadness, depression, recriminations, and regret about how the cup final went and being able to turn the page and look ahead? Where are you on your journey for that?
Yeah, I got over this quite quickly, actually. Like, I felt like everyone else, pretty despondent at the final whistle. And at Wembley, it's one of those things where it's like, what I'd really like to do is sit in my seat and stare into the abyss for 20 minutes while I process this. But Wembley is very difficult to get away from. You got to get moving. And the only advantage of losing the final is you get early mover advantage and you can get out of there before Wembley Way fills up with Manchester City fans. And so this is the quickest I ever got away from Wembley, I think. And so I was away pretty quickly on the train with my sister, got to Marylebone. For people who know, that's kind of nearish Wembley as a main London railway station. Obviously, I had very big plans if we'd have won. I knew exactly where I was going, and I knew I was going there because it has generous opening hours, etc. And I decided not to, and I still kind of left that open if we lose, but I wasn't in the mood, basically.
Yeah.
A bit, not quite as bad as in 2011 when we lost that final to Birmingham. I had tickets to see PJ Harvey that night, and I love PJ Harvey, one of my favourite musicians, and I didn't go. Because I was just like,
that's made me sad.
Yeah, I was too sad, and I was like, do you know what? I want to be sad. Like sometimes it's like it would really
just living it.
Yeah, it's like it would really cheer me up to go and see PJ Harvey now, but I don't want to be cheered up. I want to be sad and miserable. Whereas this time I got to Marylebone, which, like, I don't know, 10 minutes on the train from Wembley or whatever. And my sister went, and there's actually quite a nice pub in the corner of Marylebone Station. Very rare to have a good pub inside a train station. I just went there, and I sat on my own, and I had 2 pints of lager. In that time, the instant reaction became available. I listened to that on my way home. Again, sometimes I can't do that straight away after a painful defeat. Sometimes I have to wait the next day before I can get there. But I started listening to it straight away because I don't know. I think there's something about being beaten fair and square that I personally, obviously it gives you more to ruminate on. And I understand that can be worse sometimes because it's like, God, we lost and we deserve to lose. But for me personally, I guess I find that satisfying isn't the word, maybe like neurologically more satisfying, because now I'm trying to piece it together and I'm still thinking about it. Whereas if we'd got done on like a stupid penalty or on penalties or something, I wouldn't want to think about it, but I have thought about it quite a lot, which suggests to me like I don't have a trauma. And that's what I meant. I said this to you guys in the WhatsApp. I said it on the Patreon yesterday. I really connected with where Paul was in the instant reaction, where it's like, this is a learning point and a really valuable one. And that's exactly where I went straight away. And we'll talk about this in a minute, I'm sure, as we think about the summer. But that's exactly where my brain went straight away. And so you're always sad when you lose a cup final, but I didn't have like the anger or the injustice or any of that. I also think when you go 2-0 down and there's quite a bit of time left, you start to come to terms with it in real time as well while it's happening. And so there's like it's almost like being put gently to sleep as opposed to like, I don't know, violently stabbed or something. It's just like, I
we'll allow the analogy.
Quickly.
It's not my favorite.
No.
No. So here's where I'm at. I have been concerned for a while that we have not been playing very well.
Mm-hmm.
And that the team we were when we were pounding Bayern, right? I mean, and genuinely pounding Bayern Munich. When we beat Bayern Munich 3-1, I think the XG was like 4 to 0.6 or something, or 3 to 0.6. It was a hammer. I don't think we've been that club for a long time, or that team for a long time. The results have been good enough, and fundamentally in football, that's what gets you a league title at least. But, other than Tottenham, which almost doesn't count, and other lower league opposition like Wigan and Mansfield, I thought we were okay against Bayer Leverkusen, certainly better in the return leg. Thought we were decent against Everton, Brighton, Chelsea, Wolves, the draw. We've had some performances that have had me a bit worried. And City, as much as we recognize they're not the elite City of, years gone by, they're a good team. And I would say that City are the first really good team we've played in a long time. Because there's not many teams that I think are really elite in the Premier League right now. They're the first really good team.
Great.
And so it was an interesting time to measure us against, high-end quality. And I think it's fair to say we were found wanting quite badly, especially in the second half. Now, it's also fair to point out the absences. Very fair. Not just fair, a requirement. But where my head is going with this, Tim, is that I think it's going to be a case that we just got to drag ourselves over the line any old way we can get there. I don't think Arsenal are in very good form right now, and I am not convinced we'll get into very good form the rest of the season. I think it is more hope than it is logic to suggest that this team that has been struggling to keep the ball, struggling to create clear chances, struggling to really dominate matches, is suddenly going to figure out how to do that because reasons. Now, Eza being out is part of that. Odegaard being out may have been part of that. Maybe Odegaard comes back and he's in great form right away. And then Eza comes back and we find a way to integrate the two of them together and that helps. Or Kai continues to get more fit and his reintroduction helps us find form. These things can happen, of course. But as it stands right now, based on what I've seen, I think what the cup final says to me is it's going to be a bumpy landing. And that's okay, because I am not going to celebrate the title any less when we get there with some bumps on the way in. I would love to win the other things too, by the way. But for right now, the league is certainly paramount. We need to get there. So do you think it's fair to at least look at that performance and the extent to which we struggled to really be a participant in the game in the second half in particular, and look at our recent performances and say, barring a change like the ones I mentioned, it's probably going to be a bit harem-scarum as we go through this run-in.
Yeah, I think I think Scott put this really well in a piece he did a few months ago where he said Arsenal will be the fitting champions for the dead open play era. And I think there is a lot of that going on. I think we're going to win the league because we'll be the best team across 38 games. That's how that works.
Yep.
But not because we can blow anyone away on a given day. And this is a discussion I had with Paul on the Patreon yesterday in the countdown episode. And I kind of went on this long rant that basically I think a lot of the stuff about like Mikel Arteta's philosophy and he wants this and this, like I think it's window dressing. A good manager's philosophy is informed by the players they have, basically, and that means by the players that are available. I think if Arsenal could get we always say Mo Salah, Erling Haaland, he would do it in an absolute heartbeat. That would not be contrary to his philosophy at all. But Arsenal haven't got that player in the time he's been at the club. I would argue, fair enough. Haven't really seen that player become available. People could argue around the edges of that. So what we've amassed is a collection of very good attackers. Saka is our closest to being absolutely elite, and he's having a down season by his standards. So basically, yeah, that's the team we've been all season. Like, we're going to grit this out. I think we're going to win the league because we give very little away, generally speaking. And against most teams, that will get you a result. And we're no longer, I think, in the 90-plus point era. So, like, I think basically Arsenal are going to be able to win the league in the context that the league exists this season. And that's what pretty much everyone does, right? How did Liverpool win it last season? Arsenal and Man City were wrecked by injuries. That was the context within which they were operating. It happens all the time. You get a season where stuff happens to your rivals, stuff happens to the style of the game and things like that, or your rivals go through a bit of transition or whatnot. But we're going through transition as well. We've had bad injuries in attack, and we've had like very little kind of sense of settled play. So Tap the Mug wrote about this today. The most frequently used attacker in the Premier League this season, Bukayo Saka, 71% of the minutes available. Gyökeres, 68%. Trossard, who most of us would consider like, well, he starts and gets subbed, that's why, but 60%, Eza 51%, Ødegaard 38%, Marino 36%, and obviously that's going to keep dropping, Madueke 32, Martinelli 32, Havertz and Jesus 11. So what does that tell you? We've got different attackers all the time. And then the second one of them looks like they're coming into some form, they get injured, which is exactly what's happened to Eza. So I think some of this is independent of, well, I think a lot of it is independent of like Arteta's philosophy or his dogma or whatnot. He's working with what he has. And I would say the injury situation has justified Arsenal's kind of modus operandi last summer, which is we can't get one elite attacker. Let's go and get three pretty good ones and go from there. And I think that is, we will throw enough dirt at the wall for enough to stick to win us the league. I don't think that is Arteta's philosophy. I think that is what's available to him, what he has to work with. I think Arsenal will be deserved champions on that basis as well. And to your point, all of this will go away essentially. Yeah. But as I know we'll discuss in a bit, that doesn't mean that there isn't room for tinkering around the edges, and I think we'll see it in the summer as well.
Liverpool didn't end last season as the best team in the Premier League. They were the best team in the Premier League over the course of the season and rightfully won the title. The problem is because we all now seem to have the attention span of minnows, which is fair because just to the pace with which everything moves and social media and this and that and the other thing, people seem to think that somehow if you don't end the season great, that the fact that you were the best over the course of the season is somehow diminished because they only remember the last thing they saw, right? And that's why somehow you can have debates like some people wanted to have last summer that Tottenham had a better season than Arsenal last season. Was anyone feeling that way right now? No, obviously not. But I get it because the last thing that happened to Tottenham Hotspur is that they won a second-tier trophy. And that's just how the narrative gets built. I think Arsenal have been the best team in the league this season, and I think that's reflected in the table. I think we are at a point right now where we're sort of getting by, and I think that we're probably going to continue to. Again, to be clear, I think we're still very good. I just don't think we are as good as what the heights that we were hitting at certain points earlier this season over the last few seasons. And that means that it's going to be tricky. And we know the Premier League is tricky anyway. There's points dropped by everybody unexpectedly in every match week. Now, the good news is after the international break, we have Southampton, and then we have Sporting, and then we have Bournemouth. So we still have time to sort of reintegrate players who've been injured, get them a little bit fresh, figure out some solutions. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about this. I want to save some stuff to discuss over the next couple of podcasts, the international break, about how we could address some of the shortcomings that we saw. But to me, Tim, there was a real gap in the technical level between City and Arsenal in the second half of the cup final. And I think this comes down to a few things. Victor Gyökeres has scored some very important goals for us and scored quite a few goals for us and has been very valuable in a lot of things he's done. But the one thing we know is he's not going to help you keep the ball or build the play. You can play to him early and try to get him in behind. You can try to have him go chase some duels. But like, he's going to play 6 or 7 passes in a game. Okay. Again, that's just who he is. It's not a critique of whether you think he's good or bad. It's his identity. When you take Eze out of the team and you put Kai in midfield, Kai can get on the ball, but he's not at the technical level in small spaces in midfield of another midfielder. So we were short players who could help us keep the ball, build play, and progress the ball up the pitch. That problem isn't necessarily going away anytime soon. And since we don't know the level that Odegaard's going to be at right away, and we don't know exactly how long Eze is going to be out for, do you think that Mikel, in the meantime, will stick with Rice, Zubimendi, and Kai in midfield? Or do you think that he will start to get creative and do things like move Bukayo Saka there more regularly to ensure that we have the technical level in midfield we need to control play?
I think it will be Odegaard straight back in, and he will play as much as he can manage. I think that's the way it's most likely to go. Now, obviously, around the edges of that, you make substitutions in games. Yeah, I think we'll see plenty of Madueke on. We actually don't want to take Saka off, so we'll move him inside one and maybe look after Odegaard in the process. I mean, all of the recent trends around Odegaard tell you he's either going to get injured again or he won't be at his, at his pre-ankle injury best, because those things haven't happened for a while. I'm not saying the other thing can't happen. In fact, I think it's fairly likely if he got a run of games, he'd be great. I guess I worry slightly that we've got to learn to play with such a different player again at the exact point that we really like we'd learn to play with Eze. However, I look back over some of those games you mentioned where we struggled to hold on to the ball, like Wolves, Brighton, Chelsea, Leverkusen away. I mean, even to be able to bring Odegaard on in those games, and of course the final, would have been huge. I'm not saying he'd have solved all of it, but I wouldn't mind betting that like the Wolves equaliser doesn't happen, for example. Like Odegaard comes on, and I think that's also happened in concert with Hincapié having a really good period, and he's deserved to stay in the team. But maybe in terms of the overall team, that brought, not that his technical level is low, it's that Calafiori's is really high. So I'm not saying like Hincapié is fine technically, it's just Calafiori is kind of exceptional.
Yeah, it's a big difference
in that respect. So, we perhaps lost a little bit in there as well. And then like there's a knock-on effect where I think the decision to select Hincapié at Wembley was probably sealed by Timber being absent. I think Arteta probably didn't want White and Calafiori. He wanted one of his like tough defender guys in there, which I get. And so there are things we can solve, I think. And I think as much as it's a pain to lose Eze, at the same time, perhaps bringing, we're suffering technically, and we're probably going to bring our most technical player back into the team. Kind of boo-hoo, like that. If anything, we might be sitting here in 3 weeks' time and saying, actually, whisper it quietly, was the Eze injury a blessing in disguise because it set off this chain of events? Like that, and this is all stuff that we're talking about now. I'd love to hear the conversations Arteta and his staff are having about, I'm betting money exactly the same things right now.
Yeah, and you can't have it both ways, right? If you think our attacking talent level is not exactly where it needs to be, and due to injuries, our midfield technical level isn't where it needs to be, you can't also then say, well, Mikel's not doing a good coaching job, because if he's got us top of the league with the gap that we have, and into the semifinal one thing, and the semifinal another thing, and final another thing, with those issues you've identified, then I would regard that as an excellent coaching job under challenging situations. One thing we should remember, and this is important, I can look at Arsenal and I can say we're not as good right now as I think we can be and need to be to go achieve everything, and still not mean that I don't think Arsenal are good and will win the title and deservedly win it. Okay. The other thing is, it's worth looking at all these other huge clubs who have spent massively and ask yourself if they're doing better, if their coaches are better, if they're performing better. Chelsea? No. Liverpool? Mm-mm. Manchester United? They're going to play 40 games this season. Big advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, just about hitting the low level of the expectations, which is far below ours. Manchester City? Yeah, Manchester City are better. They won a trophy. Sure. They're not going to win the league because we are. They're already out of the Champions League.
And they finished third last season.
Yeah.
People forget that. They finished third last year.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And, by the way, no shortage of spending. Went for Semenyo in January. Went for Guehi in January. Did it get him further in the Champions League? No. Is it going to get him the title? I don't think so. So it's fair to look, this is an Arsenal podcast. So for me, I say, how can we analyze Arsenal? Where can we be better? Are we hitting our best outcomes? Are we playing our best? And I think the cup final showed we're not in a great moment in some areas, especially technically in possession. But you still have to put it in the context of what's happening around us and what we expect will happen moving forward. And while I don't want to jinx it, my expectation is, looking at the fixtures, we have enough to get over the line in the league. Do I wish City had those Bayern Munich matches between Chelsea and Arsenal? I do, but I still think we're going to get there. Now, I think if your expectation is we're going to look like our flowing, in possession, dominant, technically excellent best during the run-in, you may wind up feeling a little disappointed, but don't let that stop you from celebrating us being the best in this league over the course of the season. So let's do this. Let's shift gears to how we take what will be a celebratory treble-winning season and turn it into a dynasty, because I think there are issues that we want to address in the market this summer. And I want to ask you a little bit about that. So let's cleanse the palate with some brands. And depending on the brand, they may be good for the palate, or you may not want to put them in your mouth at all. But here are those brands, and then we'll be right back. Okay. Tim, it is the case that a lot of clubs made very big moves in the summer to address their attack. And a lot of the clubs that did that didn't make their attack better.
Mm-hmm.
Chelsea made aggressive moves. João Pedro, Delap, Gittins, right? They'd probably rather have Nani than Gittins at this point, would be my assessment. Liverpool, most famously, Wirtz, Ekitike, Isak. I rate Ekitike, although I'm not sure, he's value for money, but I rate him. Isak, obviously the injury issue makes it difficult to evaluate the decision to get them, but getting them both seems like a weird decision anyway. And Wirtz hasn't lived up to expectation. They went for attack-minded fullbacks. That hasn't worked. Manchester City, they seem to go from one decision to the next. Marmoush was in, he's out, is he in, is he out? And, they went for Semenyo. We'll see if he winds up being the solution. Savinho, there were talk he could be out after having just been brought in. So there are a lot of teams that tried to address the attack, and I think it would be fair to say none of them seem to have completely solved it. I mean, Tottenham Hotspur obviously went for Xavi Simons. Not super great. They made Matisse Tell permanent. Like, this is the kind of stuff we're working with in the Premier League right now. But we did make a couple of big moves. Eze, Nani, Gyökeres. I think Eze was just starting to really show that he's going to be value for money, and he's so good at the run-in that we really need to get him back, because this is the time of season that he can really contribute. It is my contention that attack is still a priority for this summer window, and that we need to solve, quote-unquote, left wing once and for all, so to speak, by really adding elite talent there. But I would also say that I think we probably want to look at the striker market again. So for me, this summer feels a little like last summer Redux, that we hit some, what would be good in darts, like some double 20s, but I don't think we hit enough bullseyes, and we need to go back out and try again. So what's your assessment of that viewpoint?
Yeah, definitely. Like upgrades, really. I think that's what we're talking about. And I think what's going to be key is we have to make some sales, really, to kind of facilitate that. And there are players there who we could potentially get some money for. Whether we can get money for Gabriel Jesus, I kind of doubt it. Although there are some Brazilian clubs who do have greater means than they used to. Leo Trossard, is there a market for him? Gabriel Martinelli, is there a market for him? I think that last one might be the most key, actually. in terms of replenishing, because it's unlikely, I think, that we're going to get rid of anyone we just bought. And what I find really interesting is that arguably the most successful of the three attackers we bought might be Madueke so far, just because he's kind of doing the role we bought him for, which was kind of as a high-level backup, really. Whereas like Gyökeres and Eze are a bit different. Obviously, Eze's been getting there and he has some really big moments. Gyökeres, that's...
Can I stop you? Because I want to observe something that's really kind of funny, right? All three of those players, you could argue, had Odegaard stayed fully fit and been in form, had Kai stayed fully fit and been in form, and Saka stayed fully fit and been in form, all three of those players might have seen themselves as minimally important squad additions who came in bits and pieces. And all three have had to be, and in particular, Gyökeres and Eze even more than Nani, but all three have had to be more major contributors because the players that they were kind of analogized to or in contention with wound up being absent. So it's hard to evaluate, would they have been elite squad cover and options? Because they wound up, all of them almost, having to be more than that, you know?
Yeah, I guess the phrase I'd use is we bought them for a rainy day, and it rained a lot.
That's a great way to put it. Yep.
And ultimately, like, why did we do that? It was geared on last season, where we got a couple of attacking injuries, and we really went down to the bare bones very, very quickly. So that's what I mean. You could argue it was a really successful summer in that respect, that we maybe didn't get like that one guy, but that one guy probably wasn't out there. And so what we did instead is we reinforced with numbers, and we made the injuries we got less of a big deal than they otherwise would have been. Because if we think we're going through pain at the moment with like attacking and ball progression and stuff like that, you don't have to go back too far to see Raheem Sterling and Kieran Tierney on the wings and Mikel Merino up front. We started a Champions League knockout tie with that as a front three. So, like, to be fair, I've been a bit like, we started the tie where we were 7-1 up from the second leg, but I think we only rested like one player to do that.
Yeah.
So, like, it's you know,
we had Butler Oyedeji on the bench for most of our games to finish last season.
Yeah,
with no offense to Butler Oyedeji, it's just, that's not the level we need. Yeah,
like the exercise to do that I always point to is look at our bench for the PSG second leg last season. Most of them are gone, actually. It's quite an interesting exercise in terms of where our squad is at the moment. But yeah, so you could absolutely argue we had a problem. The problem came up again and we solved it, basically. So, but you're right, in the long term, there is just a little bit more star quality needed. I'm positive about that for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, I think we've got some we got some stuff we can put at the front of the table and on the garage sale. You know, we can attract people over to our table a little bit in the summer, and at the same time, the other thing that gives me real confidence is, what does history show you with Mikel Arteta and Arsenal, is that when they get a problem in a season that becomes apparent, Mikel Arteta doesn't just correct it. Like he gets the Cuban heels out and has a good dance on his head.
Devotes his entire energy to correcting it to the point where it could never, ever, ever be an issue again. Like when we got physically outmatched by City a couple seasons ago, we are now the Monstars, right? We don't get physically outmatched.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you watched Space Jam and was like, that's the team I want.
Exactly.
But yeah, exactly. So like I've got real confidence, and we speculate, we don't know this, but we talk about those kind of flagship games where it's like, this game I think has really influenced him. I mean, the Carabao Cup final is going to be that, isn't it? Like, I bet that might break the record for Mikel Arteta rewatches. To be honest, and so I can really see us at least trying very, very earnestly to correct these things, and generally our record in the market has been good. There's players you can debate, but the amount of confirmed absolute duds, I mean, there's not many. There's really not many. No. So there's work to do, but I think they're going to have the right plan. Put it that way.
There's only two ways you can look at this, right? I mean, well, not only two ways. There's a million ways. But what I'm trying to say, but said wrong, is there's a world where we have fewer injuries in certain positions, right? So Mikel Merino stays fit. Kai Havertz is more fit over the course of the season. And Odegaard is more fit over the course of the season and in reasonable form. And how we think about the roles of Gyökeres, Eze, and Nani are slightly different. We see them as really interesting investments in additional strength and depth to get us over the 60, 65 games we're going to play this season. It is the case that Merino lost half of his season and Kai has lost arguably more than that. And as a result, and Odegaard's lost almost more than that. And as a result, the players we added not only had to contribute, but they had to contribute being starters to a team that had an ambition to win the Champions League and the Premier League. That's a very different equation. But you could see it as a massive validation and vindication of the tactics we took last summer. Mm-hmm. Because you could say, had we gotten last summer wrong, those injuries would have meant we couldn't achieve our goals. I have always said, and I want to be clear because I never want to be a hypocrite if I can avoid it, that teams that have major injuries don't win things. They just don't. That the team that's healthiest over the course of a season is what wins things. But maybe Mikel's just a little more visionary than I am, which would shock me, and said, there's going to be no such thing as a healthiest team in modern football. There's too many games to be a healthy team, right? Liverpool just about got there last season. They stayed pretty darn healthy. Their best players, Van Dijk, Salah, had a great season, and they just about got there. But towards the end, they were falling off pretty bad, but they had already gotten there. So Mikel went after squad depth. And you cannot argue that by doing that, whether you're totally impressed with what we added, those players have been good enough to have us top of the Premier League and huge favorites to win it. It is a pure validation of the approach. Mm-hmm. But I think where it leaves us now is saying, what is the ceiling on this group going forward? Let's say we win the Premier League this season. Let's say we don't get the other trophies, even though we know we're going to. That's going to be the most joyous thing that's happened in my life since the birth of my daughters, okay? Mm-hmm. Like, it's going to be incredible. But if we allow ourselves just a moment to think ahead and say we don't want to be Liverpool, who do it once and next season get it completely wrong and fall off, then I think, Tim, the issues that have been, in my view, maybe over-scrutinized about chance creation and the attack probably demand a reevaluation. Because fundamentally right now, when I look around Europe and I look at Bayern, Madrid, Barca, PSG, even City at some level, and I look at Leo, Nelly, Gyökeres, Kai, Saka, Nani, I just think we have to upgrade the ceiling level of talent that's there. And there's no guarantees, but I think we have to do it. So do you think that it is fair to observe that the mere fact of Arsenal being in a position to win the Premier League and being a huge favorite to do it is validation for the tactic we took, but that it's still reasonable to say that going forward, that tactic may not be enough and we want to try to be the best team in the world? That's what we're shooting for.
No, not at all. And when I kind of look at the summer, I think you're right in what you say, but I don't think loads needs doing. Maybe like sell an attacker or two if, Gabby, much as I love him.
I don't want to ruin the director of football stuff.
No.
But do we need to be less precious about who we sell? There's always a thing where you're like, we need to sell players. Then you list a player and you're like, well, not him. It's like, we need to sell players. Should we sell Miles? Like, well, no, not Miles. Should we sell Odegaard? Well, no,
maybe
Odegaard.
We should. And also, again, to repeat what I said on the Patreon yesterday, this stuff's driven by the market as well. Like, it just is. Like, I'm pretty sure that Arsenal went into last summer thinking we'll sell one of Martinelli or Trossard, and it didn't happen. Like, we just didn't get the offers for them. So that was kind of the end of that. We didn't extend it. We gave Trossard a pay rise near the beginning of the season. Didn't extend either of their contracts. I think that tells you that they'd have been open to an offer, but they didn't get one. And sometimes it comes to a point where you get an offer for a player that maybe you would like. Again, I don't think this will happen, but let's say someone says, I didn't realise Madueke was like that. Maybe we offer 70 million for him. And maybe we go, all right, we'd rather keep him, but you know what? That's a good offer. He's not probably not a first 11 player. Fine. Okay. All right. And we'll go again from there and we'll try and replace his attributes. And so much of it is market driven, but I kind of look at it and I think a forward and a midfielder, I don't think we really need to do very much in defence. Obviously, as well, we've got Nwaneri to come back. We've got obviously Max Down. We'll retain the treble next year because Max Downman will win it for us single-handedly.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, not to put any additional pressure on him or anything. So we've got some young players who can help with some of these problems we're talking about. And actually, there's a world in which if Ødegaard, Havertz, and Calafiori had been fit and playing all season, maybe we're not even really talking about the technical level of the team quite as much. But I look at it and think, yeah, we could probably do with another midfielder. So that Rice and Zubimendi don't have to play every minute of every game. So I don't think loads needs doing. But when I look at who is that left winger going to be, I wouldn't mind betting that there's going to be a more technical kind of side to them. And yeah, I mean, I look at it, I'm just throwing a name in the air because I don't know very much about European football and I know it costs the world and et cetera, et cetera. But Alvarez to me, if there's a way of getting that done, I think Arsenal will find it. I'm not saying they will. I'm not sure there is a way of getting it done.
We obviously have the relationship through Berta with Atleti.
Yeah, so. True. But then we also annoyed them quite a lot with the last player we bought from there, Partey with the clause. But I think
that was the old guy who did that, Tim. The new guy is great to deal with.
And as we know from Chelsea, when the staff changes, the club just completely recalibrates and doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Suddenly becomes a paragon
it's
of
just
that virtue.
A completely different entity. But I wouldn't mind betting that what Arteta would probably really like is another Leo-like player, but perhaps just with a bit more. You know what I mean? That kind of technical level.
Couldn't Eze be that? Am I going crazy?
Yes.
Could that have been the plan and we just never saw it because Odegaard's played so little?
Maybe. But I also think that potentially Eze is quite low touch. I wouldn't call him profligate, but he tries the risky thing and all of that. I wouldn't
rather have him doing that out on the wing than in the interior.
Yeah. But I just wouldn't mind betting that if we get a wide player, it will be Trossard plus. I kind of think that
you putting any stake in the Kvaratskhelia links? I mean, they're pretty specious at the moment, and the wages would be astronomical.
They would, and actually, if you look at his numbers in Ligue 1 this season, they're pretty rubbish. He didn't start against Chelsea in the first leg for a reason. It's because he's not producing very much. I think. We see these goals in the Champions League, and it's oh wow, he did that. But then you look at the week to week, and it's oh actually he's quite streaky too.
Which by the way tells you can pull the wool over people's eyes. You may have a player how are we going to sell him? He's been dreadful, and someone saw him score 3 times in the Champions League, and it's oh, that guy's great.
If perhaps you're French and you don't watch the Premier League, and you saw Eze's goal against Bayer Leverkusen, and that Arsenal are top of the league, you probably think, wow, Eze's probably been amazing all season, and he hasn't.
Or Martinelli in the Champions League.
Yeah. You probably think, oh yeah, exactly. That's a great. It's he's doing really well. Every time I put the Champions League highlights on, he scored, and then you look at his domestic numbers and they're not quite there. So I think Arteta would love to bring Alvarez. I think that would, that would almost be his dream addition. I don't know whether we could make that happen, but I think a player of that type who's just technically very safe, but can do things basically.
Yeah. And at some point, this is the problem, right? You list a Kvaratskhelia and you say, well, it'd be an astronomical fee in wages, or Alvarez would be 90 million or 100 million in huge wages.
Price.
This is the problem. If your aspiration is to be the best team in the world and you want to have the most elite attackers in particular, that's going to be an immense allocation of resources. And I thought about this. Maybe there is an evil genius approach to what we're doing, which is maybe we're gaming the transfer market a bit. I mean, we did go over 100 million for Declan Rice, so we know we're willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there's a bit of, instead of 120 million for Isak and then he breaks his ankle and your season's over, we do some for Gyökeres and some for Eze and some for Nani and some for Zubimendi and some for Nkapie, right? Now, by the way, these some are still a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But it's the point that You
not
build
having a single
team
point
that
of
in
failure.
aggregate, well, yeah, and in aggregate is very, very, very good. And yes, at the most elite level of kicking the ball in the net, you may not have the best of those players, but you've got such a strong team across all positions and levels of depth that you believe that plus your system can get you somewhere. And maybe this is a way to reframe, for example, our quality at corners, which is instead of splashing grotesque money on a striker like Liverpool did, who they haven't even used, we've built a more consistent team across all departments. And yes, we've used coaching and preparation and creativity to generate goals that we can't generate from individual brilliance as often. Because I'll tell you this too, if Bukayo Saka was sitting on 16 league goals and 10 assists, which I think we all believe is his range of outcomes and his talent, we might have a very, very different feeling also about where our weaknesses are and what our strategy is. At some level, one of the ways you get to those big gaudy goal numbers is someone up front does some special stuff, like Salah did for Liverpool last season, like Haaland and De Bruyne have done for so long for City. And the fact that we've gotten here with what I would say are pretty middling outcomes from most of our attacking players is a testament to having immense depth of quality across all departments and really good coaching. That's how I see it. And so the next step, going for elite attacking talent that can break a game open on its own, that can transform an outcome through its sheer brilliance, that's probably the next step for this team, realistically. I would say it wouldn't surprise me if Mikel looked at that cup final game, to your point, Tim, he likes to always overreact to a bad experience. Maybe he says, I need some more dribbly boys, some more technical boys in my team. I need someone who can do what a Doku does, or I need someone who can help out in those tight spaces when we're having trouble keeping the ball, so we can get to 5 passes, to 7 passes, to 10 passes, and start to get our foot back on the ball and get back into games. And it wouldn't surprise me if the summer is punctuated by an elite attacking player who's strong on the ball and maybe good dribbles, and maybe another player in midfield whose technical level is through the roof. And it unfortunately may mean that a player we feel very connected to goes, but they go, we hope, with a winner's medal around their chest for winning the Premier League, and they become a hero of this project. And so we'll just have to see. I don't think there's a lot of meat left on the bone, other than to ask you this very quickly. As you look ahead, it's Southampton and Sporting Lisbon before Bournemouth. And I think the upside to that, I mean, look, I want the Champions League bad, so I'm not going to pretend that's not a major, major game. But do you think it's a chance to emotionally get right from the cup final, to tactically get right, to fit pieces like Odegaard back into the team, to just get fine-tuned before the Bournemouth and then City games come? Because also the Lisbon game, no matter how big you think it is, Sporting Lisbon has to come to Arsenal after that, so we have a chance to right any wrongs that happen there. How lucky do you think we are in a way that we got this break after the cup final and then 2 games that feel a little lighter on consequences, so to speak, or intensity, so that we can just get the dials adjusted back before the really, really crunch fixtures come around? Yeah,
definitely. It's a lily pad, isn't it? And
it's a good way to think about it. Yep.
There are good international breaks and there are bad international breaks, and this is a good one. And I think one of the things we underestimate as well, from the kind of the players' side, they've been together constantly for 4 months. Like, this is the first international break since November, so for 4 months they've just been going game to game every 3 days. I think it do them well to get away from each other, get away from the environment. In terms of, I think Clive said this on the Arscast earlier as well, for some of them speaking their own language, eating their own food, maybe seeing, and I know a lot of national teams have big games and it's not a holiday camp or anything like that, but from an Arsenal perspective, I think that's quite good. I think you're absolutely right. The fact that the next 2 games are not league games, undoubtedly there has been a greater lightness to Arsenal in the cup competitions and in the Champions League, because as well, the other thing that makes the Bournemouth game so massive, of course all the league games are going to be massive now, but one of the many things that makes it massive is we go before City, and before they go, I think, away to Chelsea, so we've got a chance again to really raise that points level and like put it down to them, which is very easy to forget now because it was eons ago, one whole game ago. The last time we did that, they didn't deal with it. And so we've got a chance to do that again. So I think you're right. I think that it's a break that's well timed, not least as well because it's the international break where most players can conveniently pull out, and quite a few of ours have, and largely they have, not necessarily, I think, because people underestimate the way this works, right? With international teams have the say. You do not pull out of international games unless they say you can. Clubs do not pull players out. It does not work like that. So you have to have the international teams say. They sign off on it. But I think probably what's happened this time is a lot of them, because we're good, a lot of our players, they start for their countries. They know they're going to start. Like Gabriel's a lock for Brazil, Saliba's a lock for France, Rice and Saka are like they're all going to start. Everyone knows that. And while I think the national teams would probably, in an ideal world, welcome playing those players together and getting some chemistry after 4 months away, I think most of them know, actually, that would be nice. But what would be nicer is if I didn't injure those players now, because an injury, a 3-monther now, and they're out of the World Cup, basically. So they're looking after themselves by doing that. They're not looking after us. They're not looking after Arsenal. They're looking after themselves, as they have every right to do. So Brazil letting Gabriel drop out, that is a good decision for Brazil, etc., etc. Yeah. So, we're going to have quite a few of our guys who are going to get 2 weeks off. Even Saka and Rice not involved in the first England game. So there is going to be a bit of R&R for them there, which will be really, really good. But I think you're right. I think the fact that the next 2 games are cup games really helps as well. I think that helps us ease into, because after that is I described it as a lily pad. That's the last one. After that, it's downhill all the way. It's roller coaster time. So, I guess being able to ease our way into what could be an enormous 6 weeks for the club it's the best we could ask for.
Yeah. And I mean, it is the case that a lot of people look at the cup final and say, City were so much better than us. Here's the good news. City can stay better than us. It's too late now, right? We don't have to be better than City. We just have to be good enough to not lose a 6 point, and I mean, it's more than 6 points. Obviously, it's 9, but a 6 point, let's say they win their game in hand, a 6 point gap or a 9 point gap. And I think we are good enough to do that. And so, yes, would I like for us to trounce City at the Etihad, win every game the rest of the way in, win both the FA Cup and the Champions League and win a treble, and be able to say we were the best team in the world to end the season? Of course, I'd like to say that. Do we need that to happen for us to have a sensational end of the season and joy at the end of the season? We don't. But here's the good news. It is going to happen. We will win the treble, and we will celebrate it quite lustily, is my expectation, even if we have ruined football. Friday Night Clive tomorrow will be a power rankings where we laugh at our rivals. And let's not get it twisted. An important part of football is laughing at your rival's misery. It is important. And so if you are struggling to connect to the Arsenal joy right now and you need a break, please try to connect to the Liverpool misery, to the Chelsea misery. Liverpool are losing Mohamed Salah on a free and may not have Champions League football next season. They have massively fucked it. Try to enjoy that. It's funny. Tottenham are going down. It's funny. Enjoy it. Before we go, and it's a little late in the pod to do this, so maybe I'll do it at the top of the next pod as well, but Lewis McKay got in touch to let us know that his dad passed. Colin McKay was a fan of the pod, a huge Arsenal supporter, someone that we got to meet at Union Chapel, share a little cuddle and a picture. Just a lovely human being that we got to share a little bit of time with. And obviously, just want to send love to Lewis and his family and say, obviously rest in peace to Colin McKay, who will be missed, but whose memory will carry on, and hopefully who will have a chance to have his family celebrating some big success for Arsenal at the end of this season. So love to the McKay family, and obviously heartfelt sorrow on the passing of Lewis's dad. So that's it's a bit of a downer note to end on, but I think it's important, as a community to celebrate the life of the people who make it up. So we can definitely leave it there. And Tim, thanks again, and we'll look forward to talking to you on the next one.
Yeah, my pleasure as always.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Southampton 0.